The 27th chapter. Got some pretty exciting things happening here. These chapters we studied about Cinderella and Belial last message. Cinderella and Belial. This lady was married to this worthless man. I mean, he was a bad boy. He had a good lineage from Caleb, but he was a bad boy. And just miserable character. His name was Nabal, and he had a wonderful wife by the name of Abigail, and anyway, she saved his life, and then God killed him, and David took her as his wife also. Now we come up to the 27th chapter, and David said to himself, now he's thinking, now I will perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than to escape into the land of the Philistines. Saul then will despair of searching for me anymore in all the territory of Israel, and I will escape from his hand. Now, 2 times David could have killed Saul. 2 times he could have killed him, but he didn't do it. And every time he confronted Saul from a distance and telling him, I could have killed you, God gave you in my hand, but I didn't do it. Because you are the anointed of the Lord, and I am not going to raise my hand against God's anointed, even if you're wrong. So David arose and crossed over, and he and 600 men with him, to Achish, the son of Maok, the king of Gath. And David lived with Achish at Gath, and he and his men, each with his household, even David with his 2 wives, Ahinoam and Jezreelites, and Abigail the Carmelitess, and Nabal's widow. Now it was told Saul that David had fled to Gath, so he no longer searched for him. He wasn't going to go into enemy territory to kill this man he thought was his foe and his enemy. Then David said to Achish, if now I have found favor in your sight, let me give me a place in one of the cities in the country that I may live there. For why should your servant live in the royal city with you? And so Achish gave him Ziklag that day, and therefore Ziklag has belonged to the kings of Judah to this day. And the number of days that David lived in the country of the Philistines was 1 year and 4 months. And David and his men went up and raided the Gershites and the Gerizzites and the Amalekites, for they were inhabitants of the land from ancient times, as you come to Shur, even as far as the land of Egypt. And David attacked the land and did not leave a man or woman alive. And he took away the sheep, the cattle, and the donkeys and camels and the clothing. Then he returned and came to Achish. Now Achish said, where you made a raid today? And David said, against the Negev of Judah, and against the Negev of Jereshmalites, and against the Negev of the Kenites. And David did not leave a man or a woman alive to bring to Gath, saying, lest they should tell about us, saying, so David has done and has been his practice all this time, and he has lived in the country of the Philistines. So Achish believed David, saying, he has surely made himself odious among his people Israel, therefore he will become my servant forever. A political alliance is what it is. That's politics now. David was interested in politics only as far as it could keep him alive, and he was God's anointed. We know that. He was the only king of Israel in all reality, because he was the man that God wanted to be king all the time. Now it came about in those days that the Philistines gathered their armies, camps for war to fight against Israel, and Achish said to David, know assuredly that you will go out with me in the camp, you and your men. They're going to go fight his own people now, he said. And David said to Achish, very well, you shall know what your servant can do. So Achish said to David, very well, I will make you my bodyguard for life. Now, the bodyguards for President Trump here a while, the FBI at least, and some of them were not doing their job worthy. We found that out absolutely. Well, now this guy said, I want you to be my bodyguard. Now let's see how David does. Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had lamented him and buried him in Ramah, his own city. And Saul had removed from the land those who were mediums and spiritists. Mediums and spiritists. Do mediums actually do work? Do they actually work with spirits? What is a medium? A medium is a go-between. A medium, they say, is a go-between the physical realm that we live in and the spiritual realm. And in this spiritual realm, they know things that we don't know, because they live in at least a 10-dimensional world. Can they see the future? Probably. From what we know about it. And he had removed all of these mediums and spiritists. They were fortune tellers. Now, how many of you ever seen a palm reader? Palm reader. I think over there in Bishop someplace, I think I saw a sign up here a while back that it said psalmist, palm reader. Who were the original palm readers? Gypsies. And from the year, from basically 100 AD to this way.
Was it the gypsies?
The Jews. The Jewish people. The Jewish people were. With the Kabbalah and all of that, they were the palm readers. They got involved in this wicked situation. Are there really spirits that are communicating with people? Yes. They are not people that died and went on into the another world. They are evil spirits, which we call demons. And these people are dealing with demons. So the Philistines gathered together, and they came and camped in Shunem. And Saul gathered all Israel together, and they camped at Gilboa. And when Saul saw the camp of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. And when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him, either by dreams, or by Urim, or by prophets. Now he had killed, remember, he wiped out the priest. He killed them all. He had Doeg, the Edomite, kill them all, except one escaped. And that one went to David. Then Saul said to his servant, seek for me a woman who is a medium, a woman who has the powers of Mantuamene. And Acts 16th chapter and verse 16, let's go over there. Acts 16 and verse 16. That's right after the Gospel of John. The Acts of the Apostles, or the Acts of the Church is what I call it. Acts 16:16. And it happened that as they were going from place to place, a certain slave girl, having been controlled by the spirit of a Pythona. What is a Pythona? In English, it's python. And what is a python?
Snake.
It's a snake. Now, in the Bible, many times the word snake is used for Satan. Nahash, or Pythona. And so this woman had a spirit of a demon, or a spirit of Satan, and the spirit of divination met us, who was bringing her masters much profit by fortune telling. Was she able to fortune tell? By that spirit, she definitely was. And what would happen is she would speak to her servant, her masters, in an unknown language, a spirit language, a demonic language, and they would interpret to the other people. And this is what we call the spirit of Mantuamene. Now the modern tongue movement today has this ability, they say. If they're having this ability at all, There was never speaking in an unknown language ever used by the prophets of God. Never. They spoke in a language that had a glossary, that had a grammar and everything, and they spoke in a language where they went because they didn't know the language, and God gave them the gift to speak into those languages wherever they went. It was not an unknown language. It was only an unknown language to them, but when they could get up and preach, they'd preach in this language of the people they were speaking to, whether they knew the language or not. They were following after Paul, and she kept on crying out, saying, "These men are bondservants of the Most High God, who are proclaiming to you the way of salvation." Now, I know that many translations say a way of salvation. That is not what it says. There is no indefinite article in Greek. There's no a's or ands in Greek. So what she said here, proclaiming to you the way of salvation. And she continued doing this for many days, but Paul was greatly annoyed and turned and said to the Spirit in her, that was speaking through her, "I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." And he came out that very moment. It was a demon spirit indwelling her that was giving her this ability. And when her masters saw that their hope of profit was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace before the authorities. And when they had brought them to the chief magistrates, they said, "These men are throwing our city into confusion, being Jews, and are proclaiming customs which are not lawful for us to accept or to observe, being Romans." And the crowd rose up together against them, for the chief magistrates tore the robes off of them and proceeded in order to have them beaten with rods. And when they had inflicted them blows upon them, threw them in the prison, commanding the jailer to guard them secretly. And he, having received such a command, threw them into the inner prison, at what we call maximum security, and fastened their feet in stocks. But about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns, and praise to God, and prisoners were listening to them. And suddenly there came a great earthquake, and the foundation of the prison house was shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's chains were unfastened. And now here we have the jailer said down here in verse, he brought them out, and he says, "Sir, what must I do to be saved?" And we have the salvation of this jailer here. But the whole story there was that this girl was giving them much profit because she was fortune telling with a demon spirit. Now, let's go on back here. These spirits and this type of situation goes all the way back into Adam's time, probably. Demons have always been busy. We know that the snake was caused to speak in the garden, don't we? The Pithona, the snake, the Nahash. Saul said to his servants, "Seek the woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her." And his servants said to him, "Behold, there is a woman who is a medium at Endor." Now, how did they know this? These people, Saul had these people expelled because God said, "Kill them." Saul disguised himself by putting on other clothes and went, he and two of his men with him, and they came to the woman by night. And he said, "Conjure up for me, please, and bring up for me whom I shall name to you." Now see, she is communicating with spirits, supposedly. But what she's communicating is with demons that know everything and know you, know me, whatever. They know every word we say, every act we act. But the woman said to him, "Behold, you know what Saul has done, how he has cut off those who are medium and spirits from the land, and why are you then having the snare of my life, bring about my death?" And Saul vowed to her, "By the Lord, use God's name in vain. As the Lord lives, there shall no punishment come upon you for this thing." And the woman said, whom shall I bring up for you? And he said, bring up Samuel for me. Now God is going to intervene here. Her normal spirit is not going to imitate Saul. God is going to interrupt this little seance here. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice and spoke to Saul, saying, why have you deceived me? For you are Saul. It's not a demon spirit now. It is real Saul. It is not a demon here, but it is Samuel. And the king said to her, do not be afraid, but what do you see? And the woman said to Saul, I see a divine being coming up out of the earth. And he said to her, what is his form? And she said, he's an old man, is coming up, and he has a wrapper around him like a robe. And Saul knew that it was Samuel, and he bowed his face to the ground and did homage. And Samuel said to Saul, why have you disturbed me from bringing me up? And Saul answered, I am greatly distressed, for the Philistines are waging war against me, and God has departed from me, and answers me no more, either through prophets or dreams. Therefore I have called upon you, that you may make known to me what should I do. Now I'm going to tell you something. You can't escape the hand of God. David had said, maybe God will remove Saul. I don't know, but I'm not going to touch him. Now God's getting ready to remove Saul. You know, Saul made sacrifices when he wasn't supposed to make sacrifices. He did not follow the clear instructions of God. When God told him to do something, he gave the battle into his hands, but he would not follow the instructions of God. And Samuel said, why then do you ask me, since the Lord has departed from you and has become your adversary, your enemy? And the Lord has done according to, as he spoke through me, for the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hands and has given it to your neighbor, even to David. And you did not obey the Lord, nor did you execute his fierce wrath on Amalekites, or Amalek. So the Lord has done this thing to you this very day. Moreover, the Lord also gave over Israel along with you into the hands of the Philistines. Therefore tomorrow you and your sons will be with me indeed. He and his sons are going to get to go to heaven. Saul was a saved man out of the will of God. As simple as that. He knew God, but he just went directly against God's will. And the Lord will give you over the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines. Then Saul immediately fell full length upon the ground and was very afraid because of the words of Samuel. Also there was no strength in him, for he had eaten no food day or night, and all day and all night. And the woman came to Saul and saw that he was terrified, and she said to him, behold, your maidservant has obeyed you. And I have taken my life in my hand, and have listened to your words, which you have spoken to me. So now also listen to the voice of your maiden, and let me set a piece of bread before you, that you may eat and have strength where you go, and then you go on your way. But he refused and said, I will not eat. However, his servants together with the woman urged him, and he listened to them. And he arose from the ground and sat on the bed. And the woman had fattened calf in the house, and she quickly slaughtered it. And she took flour, she kneaded it, and baked unleavened bread from it. See, she knew the right way, but she went the wrong way too. And she brought it before Saul and his servants, and they ate, and they rose, and they went away that night. What happened here? We have a woman that's dealing in witchcraft. We have Saul that disobeyed God, and God said it'll cost you your life. One time, you know, in the future now, David would do something that was horrible. He had a man murdered. One of the representatives in Congress got up the other day, and they were talking about the attempted assassination with Trump. And they found out there was a lot of loopholes in the Secret Service and in the FBI, that they had not done the job that they should have done. Now we know in the future that David is going to fall in love and in lust with a woman, Bathsheba. He saw her down cleansing herself in the public well or fountain or bath. As he looked down upon there, he demanded that they bring her to him, and they brought her to him, and he had sex with her, and he did it over and over and over again, Bathsheba. Now she was Uriah the Hittite's wife. He was a conversion. He was David's bodyguard. He was David's Secret Service, but he was out fighting war now. And Bathsheba told David, she said, "I'm pregnant. What are we going to do? I'm pregnant. I haven't been with my husband." So David sends forth to his general and says, "Send Uriah the Hittite to me." And Uriah the Hittite got there, and they were besieging a city. And he came to David, and David said, "Oh, go home to your wife and go to bed with your wife. You know, you're here, you know, go do your husband duties with your wife." He said, "I will not go, and I will not sleep in my wife's bed while the sons of Israel are out there fighting wars. I will not do this." So the next night, he wouldn't do it, so he didn't go there. David checked it out, he had him watched. And so the next night, he got him drunk. Well, you know, when you're drunk, you do stupid things. Well, sometimes when you're drunk, you do things that you wouldn't do when you were sober. Well, Uriah the Hittite was a righteous man, sober and drunk, either one. You got him drunk, and he lay right there at David's door. He wouldn't go home with his wife. So David sent a letter by Uriah in his own hand. He said, "You go against the city, get right against the wall, and you put Uriah right out there in the front line, and then you back off and leave him there." Uriah got killed. And the general wrote a letter back to David. He said, "Well, Uriah is dead, just like you said. He's gone to the happy hunting grounds. He's gone." So David righteously and as a wondrous person took Bathsheba as his wife to honor Uriah the Hittite. And then comes the prophet of God, and he tells David, he said, "David, there was a man, a very poor man, and there was a rich man. And the poor man had a little lamb that he slept in the bed with him, and everything. He took care of this lamb. It was the only lamb he had. He loved the lamb. And he said his neighbor had some rich people coming, and he went out there and he said, go over there and kill the poor man's lamb and slaughter it and have the feast for me." And so he told this to David, and David said, "That man shall die." And the prophet of God said, "You are the man." Like that. Well, this representative stood up there and he said, "I hope that what happened to President Trump was not like Uriah the Hittite. I hope the orders didn't come from above and cause this to happen and put him out on that stage when they knew that man was there. And maybe even more. Who knows?" Yeah. God's providence. God's providence. Now when David repented of that, he said, "I am a sinner." And the prophet of God said, "David, the child which you conceive with her shall die, and the sword shall never depart from your house. And when that child was dying, David begged God. He wouldn't eat or anything. He begged God to change his mind. His servants were afraid for his life. And when the child died, they were afraid to tell him. And he heard them whispering. He said, "What is it?" And they said, "The child has died. We're afraid to tell you." He said, "Go cook me some food, get me some clothes, I'm going to take a bath," and whatever. They said, "You were so distraught when the child was sick, and now that the child has died, you're rejoicing." He said, "God answered my prayer." He said, "No." He said, "No." He said, "No. Why should I fight against the will of God?" Well, David was a man that repented many times. He was a very, what we might call, had an Adamic nature, and yet he loved his God to the full extent. Well, we're going to see the rest of the story pretty soon. What's going to happen to Saul. Our Father, we send this message out for your honor and glory. Please use it. Please apply it to our hearts and to our minds and to our souls. Please forgive me where I failed you. In Jesus' name.